Hey everybody, this is Renae from The Space Between, and you are listening to The Space Between podcast, the show that lets you listen to how the fans feel about the music, the art behind over 30 years of the Dave Matthews Band. Stay tuned. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Space Between podcast, the podcast where we talk about the fans of the Dave Matthews Band. If you are listening today on your favorite podcast, just know that if you want to watch this episode, you can watch all of our episodes on my YouTube channel, which is just simply the Space Between podcast on YouTube. So today, of course, and with every episode, I have a new fan to tell their story about the journey that they have taken with the Dave Matthews Band. So today we have Scott. Scott, thank you so much for being on the Space Between. How are you today?
I am fantastic. Thank you. I'm looking forward to it. So
Awesome. So Scott, tell me a little bit about yourself. Who are you? Where do you live? What's your family look like? What keeps you busy outside of music?
children keep me busy outside of music. So I'm in St. Louis. I'm 15 minutes outside of St. Louis, West County. Pretty much lived here most of my life outside of a couple. I used to be in radio, so I had a couple of other markets here and there, but mostly spent my time here. But yeah, I live here with my fiance. I have a teenage son. She has two teenagers. I have a toddler. So yeah, three teenagers and a toddler. So there's a lot of attitude in the house at times. But yeah, and then outside of, I have my day job and then I play music. I just had a gig at a winery yesterday, so I play a few times a month. I try to fit in some DMV stuff when it's requested, so or Tim
So
stuff for that matter.
what do you play? Let's be very specific. What do you play?
I play guitar. I can pretty much play anything with strings. Nothing, or piano for that matter. But for the money, I play the guitar though. So yeah, I've been
So
playing
tell us about,
probably.
yeah, how long?
Yeah, I was going to say I'm trying to do the math. So I guess I've been playing for about 34 years. I
Wow.
started when I was like 11 or 12, 46 now. I had two uncles that played, one on each side of the family. My mom's side, there was an uncle that played guitar, and then, of course, my uncle Tim, who was in Dave Matthews Band on my dad's side. Actually, my entire dad's side of the family all played me. They had a gospel band. They toured around. My grandfather played guitar and everything else. My aunt played piano. So that whole side of the family is probably where I got that from. So.
Tell us about your childhood, and of course, guys, if you didn't hear that, yes, his uncle is Tim Reynolds. So, what does a childhood look like when Tim Reynolds is your uncle? Like, did you fall in love with music because of him, or was that something that was completely separate? And then that kind of tagged on with what y'all's relationship kind of moved forward with. What was kind of your, I guess, your interest in playing guitar? Was it because your family did, or did you find your own way?
It was a little bit of both. So I took my own path as far as interests and styles. I used to sort of say, as far as like Tim showing me things, yeah, there was obviously an interest. When you have an uncle like Tim who was just playing and noodling crazy stuff when you're a kid and blowing my mind when I'm 10 years old, I'm like, yeah, I want to do that. I don't want to play football. And so that was a pretty easy decision to jump onto that. But he was always, I always sort of say he was like my Miyagi. So, he kind of keeps me grounded. So, a lot of times, especially through high school, especially when DMB was coming up, I was sort of a metalhead. I'm a rock guy. I like loud guitars. And it's kind of nice because Tim would keep me grounded. He does too, believe it or not. Tim's a metalhead. Like, we've seen the Deftones together. So he can appreciate, which is cool for me. So he can appreciate where I'm coming from. But it's nice because he can say, okay, that's cool, but also listen to this style. Like, listen to everything. Listen to Indian music. You don't have to like buy the records, but if you're gonna play, you know, little tidbits of different kinds of world music, and I appreciate him for doing that. That's what really sort of helped me along to make sure I didn't get stuck in rock and roll world. And then that brought me out to jazz and all sorts of things. So it was cool looking up to him because he did play everything. He's played heavy stuff and industrial. He's into Nine Inch Nails and jazz and like Stream, his acoustic stuff. So that's kind of where I got that because I was shown there was a lot of really cool music in a lot of different corners.
They
So
are. There's so many influences out there. And so I did a little bit of reading before I came into this interview because I wanted to know a little bit more about Tim Reynolds because, again, my knowledge of him is completely different than the knowledge that you have. Of course, what I know him from is the Dave Matthews Band, and you know him in a completely separate light. But in the reading I read, now you can confirm if this is true or not, that he was self taught when it came to the guitar. Is that true?
Oh yeah, he did have some music teachers. I know he just found a music teacher from high school or something recently when he was in St. Louis and gave him a call. So I know he had teachers, but I think for the most part he was self-taught. He used to do a lot of what I would do, just sit in front. In fact, he gave me a lot of records when he first moved to Charlottesville. I had a bunch of old records, and I would do the same as him, just sit in front of the radio and just learn to play every song before the song was done playing, and then moved on to the next one. So yeah, I think it was a lot of that for him. It was a lot of playing by ear. But I do know he's had some different teachers. I know he worked with a little bit with Emily Rimler, who was she was a fantastic jazz guitarist back in the '80s. Look her up. She should be up there with the Wes Montgomerys in the world. So he's had different people show him stuff. But yeah, I think the over arc is pretty much him finding it himself. Same with me.
Translate when it went to you finding like how do I play this guitar? Are you mostly self-taught? Was he really in that process, or like what did it look like? Were you in school? Like, did you have music classes? What did it look like when it came to you wanting to figure it all out?
So I did get interested in the actual music part because I like seeing the lines and these dots, and I want to know what all of that means. And it's, to this day, I'm still a music theory nerd. So I did have some straight lessons from a music place for about 3 years. I ended up in jazz band all through high school, which was an awesome experience. Um, as far as like where he connected with that, he moved when I was pretty young out to Charlottesville before I was really getting into guitar. So it's not that much different than it is now, where I see him once or twice a year. And even back then, he would come in. I'd have my questions ready, and we'd go. He would come visit my grandfather's house, and we'd go in the back room and just play for a while. I had a little tape recorder. I wish I could find it. I had this little tape recorder. I record all of our stuff, and I remember one of the very first things he showed me. Like back then, on guitar, the first thing you learn is "Stairway to Heaven," right? Or one of the classic guitar riffs. And so I remember him telling me, you know what? Everyone's going to play Stairway, so I'm going to show you the guitar solo, the Stairway to Heaven. So I'm in eighth grade, jamming the guitar solo, and then now, X amount of years later, he's playing the solo and all along the Watchtower live. So that was like my full circle moment. So yeah, so to answer your question, it was still how it is now. I'd see him a couple of times a year, but I would get a lot out of it. Spend 2 hours in a room talking music with him, and that's a year's worth.
Yeah, that's wild. So, talk about your uncle's journey and what that's looked like through your eyes. Obviously, being a fan is completely different, and I've never experienced this before because none of my family is quite as cool as yours is. But like, what must that be like to be a fan? And did like your love for the band come into action because he was in it? Is that kind of how you found that band? Like, tell us what your voyage to the Dave Matthews Band looked like.
Okay, so it was a little bit of a stretch. So when it first came out, he's been in different bands. He's done different, Puke Matrix, TR3, and different things. So when I hear this Dave Matthews Band come out, I was like, oh, cool, he's got another band. I think I was like in high school, and then all of a sudden, hey, they got a song on the radio. I'm like, okay, that's a little farther than the pre. And then all of a
Yes.
sudden, another song, and then Crash Into Me comes in. And so again, at the time, I was in high school. I was in jazz band. I liked a lot of hard stuff, so I thought it was cool that he was part of this project that was on the radio. But it wasn't quite my thing because there's this violin, right? And there's a saxophone. I'm like, that's
Yes.
not cool. I want to part. And
Right.
and it really connected when I saw me and Tim, Dave and Tim, just acoustic. I believe it was in Columbia, Mizzou. It was just their show, and then that's when it clicked because everything else was stripped away.
Mhm.
And I don't mean it's because Tim was playing with him. It was all of a sudden it was cool because I just heard the guitar parts that Dave was doing. I heard the songs almost probably as he wrote them, right, stripped down. And then I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. And then obviously he started playing more and more with the band, and of course I'm an electric guitar guy, so that sort of kind of kept me connected. And then whenever Tim, he didn't play with them for a while, like through every day and some, through that period. And I found myself sticking with it at that point. It's like, okay, this violin is cool, the saxophone is cool. So it wasn't like this immediate slam in the face, like, oh, this band's amazing. Like, they were great, don't get me wrong. But as far as like the fandom part, it sort of hit after he left because I found myself still listening to it.
Yeah, I think that's so funny, and honestly, like that's a very similar story to me, and probably a lot of people. Like it sneaks up on you, and you're kind of because it was just everywhere in the '90s, right? Like
Right.
it was just everywhere. It was on the radio. It was the things you were hearing about, and so you have to just it can find you before you're ready. And so I wasn't ready for a few more years. So I totally relate to that story. It wasn't exactly my jam right when it came out, but when it was time for me to hear it, boy did I. And it kind of it's still here, like it stuck and it kind of held on. But um so tell us, like, as things progressed and as, obviously he became more famous. And it's funny because, like, in my limited memory of Tim Reynolds being part of the Dave Matthews Band, obviously, since I knew about the band, at the time when I first heard about them, I didn't necessarily know all the ins and outs of the band. Like, yeah, I knew that Dave Matthews was the singer because it was kind of a dead giveaway with the name of the band, right? But like, as far as knowing who they all were and blah, 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 I didn't know that. But as time marched on, one person that I did know about was Tim Reynolds because at that time he was kind of just a guest, right? He would just show up and he would be part of it. And so it was a really big deal to get to see him, or at least in my group of people, like going to a concert that Tim Reynolds was at was like a really big deal. And so that's kind of how I figured him out. And then thankfully, like most of the time that I have been just kind of what I would call a diehard fan, he's been part of it. So I don't remember a whole lot of time that he wasn't with the band, but there was so much time that he wasn't with them. So, he was off doing other things like TR3, which is still, outgoing. And for those of you that are listening that have never heard of TR3, I believe their tour just ended.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that that's something that will continue to go on and on. So definitely check that out. I think it's a way to really kind of take the man out of the band and look at his talents at an up close view because his music is very different. And in my reading I read, of course it's natural to see him out and about, and if you're a fan of the Dave Matthews Band, to almost request him to play a song from the Dave Matthews Band. But somewhere I read that he doesn't necessarily want to do that when he's
Nope.
off on his own, doing his own thing. The last thing he kind of wants to be asked is, hey, can you play whatever from the Dave Matthews Band? No, he wants to highlight his own music. So tell me a little bit about that. Like, if you have anything to shed into that,
Yeah.
like him writing his own music and kind of creating a style of his own. From your point of view, what has that looked like? And in your years of watching them, has that changed or is it kind of held the same and just grown?
It changes every album. Earlier, I was talking about where he was telling me to listen to different styles of music from around the world, and he does that with his albums now. In fact, they've talking about them being ongoing. They've got an album coming out in a couple of months, maybe January, somewhere like that. I've heard it, and I told him I don't care if you're family or not. This is the best stuff I've heard you do. It's acoustic, it's kind of chill, but it's got a groove. But that's not all of his albums. He's done stuff that's like crazy psychedelic industrial. I remember one time he played in St. Louis in the late '90s, and this is when he had the dark long hair and his Nine Inch Nails phase is what I call it. And so a bunch of people come out to see his show, and there's a lot of the DMB fans and not knowing what to expect. And he comes out, he's got a gas mask on and the smoke machine. And he was playing like Ministry covers and the Prodigy, and these guys are just like they didn't know what they got themselves into. Like it was one of the
Yeah.
funniest things I've seen. But even you're talking about being separate. I remember like for a time, like he wouldn't even play stream at his solo acoustic shows just because I don't know if that was like a subconscious thing of wanting that world completely separate. Which I understand when he's off the road, DMB road, he's in TR3 mode, and there's none of this whatsoever. I mean, the band's gracious enough that they promote a lot of his things. They promote his tour on their social medias and things like that. But other than
Absolutely.
that, that's his thing, and DMB's the other, on the left hand. So stylistically, though, it's all over. I mean, I haven't seen it as far as like get louder, softer, more jazzier. I don't know what I'm getting when he's like, "Oh, I got a new album." Who knows where this journey is going? He did do some pretty cool acoustic things that, to me, reminded me of some of the stuff I really liked in the '90s. He did some stuff during COVID. He did an album and a couple of one-off tracks and some YouTube shows. That was sort of a throwback for me. I thought that was pretty neat. But yeah, you never know what you're going to get with that guy. Even night to night when you play live. Like, no, I've gotten to, jam with him on stage a couple of times. And the last time in Bloomington, he'll call us like, "Hey, you're coming to the show tomorrow? Bring your amp and guitar." I'm like, okay. I don't know what I'm playing when I get there. You don't know what to expect. That's part of the fun. I mean, D&B does that too. They do different set lists every night, or different things. He does that as well. So it's a trip. Yeah, it's cool.
You playing with your uncle a little bit. So let's rewind time and think about the first time that you did play with him in any capacity, whether there was a small audience or a large audience. How does that conversation begin? Do you ask him or does he approach you? Like, how does this all happen?
I don't. So the first time, I want to say it was my friend Rob who brought up the idea, who tours with Tim. I think you guys might be friends actually. Rob Mickham. He's sort of, I don't know what you call him, but he's like their guy on the road. He does everything. If I remember right, he brought up the idea because there was a show in Illinois, I want to say, and I was opening for him. So it wasn't a thing we were jamming together. It was me and my friend Eric and my buddy Maurice, and we were going to open for him. And so I think it came up naturally over that day. It's like, "Hey man, he's got this stuff. We got two Reynolds on the building," and they kind of see the juices start flowing. It's like, you know what, that might be cool. Let's do and we did James Brown, Sex Machine. And that was a video I think I sold you. In fact, that was the one we didn't even tell him. They used to carry around this tub full of costumes like Winnie the Pooh and ducks and Elmo and all sorts of, just like you would wear in a theater play or something. And so Fluffy, his manager, which he's like my other uncle, love Fluffy. I think it was him. He had the ideas like, well, when you go on stage to jam with Tim, we're going to dress you up in this outfit. We're not going to tell him. And then we took a couple of my friends who were just there in the audience. We're going to put them in a banana outfit and an Elmo. So it was my turn to go play. All these, you see this cast of like Sesame Street or something walking out on stage. He had no idea it was coming, by the way. So that's the video you see me jamming. I'm in a Winnie the Pooh outfit. And there's a point in the video where we're going back and forth and we're just shredding, right? And it's almost like a friendly family rivalry. Just we kind of out shredded. And trust me, he'll put me in my place. But we're going back and forth, and then we're in costumes, and there Elmo's dancing, Tigger's dancing across. And he looks at me, he's just like, "This is ridiculous!" Like he's just cracking up, and it was so
fun. Face, or was it hidden? Like, did he know it was? I mean, obviously he knew it was you.
No, the face was open. He knew it was me.
Gotcha.
But the other ones, I want to say, I don't remember. I have to go back and see the video. But Tigger was it was a full outfit, full banana. I remember there was Elmo. It was out of control. So that was the first time, to answer your question, that I played with him.
But unforgettable moment, right? Like,
yeah,
yeah.
But I think it just came up naturally. I've never asked him. Usually, it's like, "Hey, do you have your guitar with you, or do you want to bring it?" There was one time I remember I played a gig in a D&B tribute band that I do in Chicago, or did. And then I went to connect with him at one of their gigs that wasn't too far. So I happened to just have the guitar on me. And so I learned my lesson. Like, whenever I go see him, I'm going to bring the guitar and I'll throw it in the trunk because you never know.
Stay prepared. Just keep it with you all of the time.
Right.
You never know.
And that's kind of how a lot of it come up. Not a whole lot of it has been prepped ahead of time. So it's usually spur of the moment or the day before.
Your life look like musically outside of your family? What do you do on a regular basis to I guess to entertain? Like, do you play on the regular with other people? Like, what does your life look like as far as playing guitar?
Yeah, I mean, it's not as busy as it used to be. I play with a friend Matt Collin around town now. We usually play at least twice a month with some other odds and ends thrown in. And then there's St. Louis kind of has like a group of musicians. Everyone knows each other. So sometimes, someone will fill in for this person. And then, so it's a lot of different combos. It's a lot of friends sort of mixing and matching. But really, it's just, I don't do a lot of full band stuff anymore. It's pretty much 2 or 3 people, acoustics, and maybe some percussion. which is fine for me because I can play gigs and then I'm home at 9:30 at night, and no more getting home at 1 in the morning and after a bar night or something. So uh, that's kind of how I like it now. And we still don't do set. I have no idea what we're going to play until we get there now. So luckily, I've learned a lot of songs over the years that I can kind of hold my own.
With having a toddler, as you said, and it's a little boy, right? Like,
Yeah,
do you dream to one day pass along these skills to him? Do you think already, just as like, does he like to watch you play when you're at home?
it does.
What does it look like being a dad and wanting to maybe pass along those musical traits to your own child?
So I always said that I wouldn't push anything, but I would show things. So I have a 16-year-old too who also plays a little keyboard, and I would kind of give little things musically, and then he's now into like production and doing mixing. So he had a production recording class in high school, and so he's sort of gone off on that end. So to me, I feel like I'll just give the base. I'll show my kids this is what I'm doing. Wherever that stems off of is on you. The toddler, yeah, it's kind of hard to play guitar when he's around. I have to do it in another room where he's picking at it. And he's got his own drum set and his own keyboard. He can't keep the drum set together. He's taking it apart a lot, so we haven't got to actually playing it yet. Um, yeah, but I think
It'll
it's I always have friends and like joking. It's like, oh, he's got the Reynolds gene in him already, or I hear that all the time. So, like,
He
hopefully,
does. Yeah, he does.
yeah,
So it may all happen, and then you know how it goes with families. Just because your parents are talented does not mean that you will end up with a musical talent. So you just never know how kids are going to work out and what they're going to be good at. He may like anything but music. So we'll see. That'll be fun for you to watch. And
yeah.
uh, kids are the most fun. So you have three children. What do they think about you playing and your life and your uncle? Like, is all of that cool to them? Because like my kids think things like that are kind of stupid because like they're so much older, right? Like when I talk about the Dave Matthews Band, they're like, that's a bunch of old men, and I'm like, is it really? No, it's not. So what do your children think about all of this?
So I have two children that are mine, and then my fiance's got two teenagers. So we got three teens and the toddler. Obviously, the toddler has no idea who anybody is in the family, but Colton, my 16-year-old, he's over the last couple of years thought it was pretty cool. I got to I took him to a DMB show. In fact, it was the last time we were here, and I'll have to show you. But Tim took him on stage, let him hold his guitar. Dave talked to him for a bit before the show and after the show. I had just gone to see Tool with Stefan and Tim, and I forget who else, some other guys. And so Stefan come over during encore, and he's like, "Hey, I'm friends with your dad. How's it going?" So he at that point he started like getting real, like, "Okay, this is kind of cool." And then Jeff come over with his two saxophones on each arm and was hugging him, man. So he got the full experience. So now he's like, "Oh my gosh, my history teacher said he's a huge fan of Dave." So now it's kind of like, this is kind of cool. And even my fiance's got a 15-year-old, and he's starting to like little by little. Is like, yeah, my girlfriend's dad said he, grew up going to Dave Matthews shows. So it starting to make the connection now.
Parents, my dad likes them, or my mom. It's never
Right.
them, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so let's talk more about this trip to see Tool. So I think that's something that maybe a lot of fans know about Stefan, only because like on XM, different members of the band will introduce songs or groups that they like, and so Tool is one that Stefan said that he liked. So you can confirm that by saying yes, you've been to a Tool concert with
Oh yeah.
Stefan and Tim. So what was that like to see him outside of everything, like when he's watching another band? Of course, I'm going to guess that he's just in complete fan mode at that time, right? To
Yeah.
watch them and what they're doing. So, how different is it to be around them watching someone else present music?
If I remember, I mean, I think Stefan was pretty chill. So we had second row, right in the middle. I had never been that close at a show that was in an arena, outside of a club. So we were getting the guitar sounds from the stage, and it was we didn't get as much of the lights that everybody in the back of the arena was getting, but we were getting the sound, and so that was pretty cool. Yeah, he was sort of taking it in. Um, Tim's more the rocker live. He'll get down, he'll jam and shred out, and he'll get down and into it. Yeah, I mean, it is. I guess it is kind of cool. I didn't really, I guess, think about it from them
Sure.
being a fan star point of view. You know what I mean? Like, but now you
I
mention it, yeah, because it's like you're there with friends. Like I remember we just sat there, like Stefan and I just talked about like our kids and things like that the whole way. It was funny the guy that picked us up to take us over, the Uber driver, ordered Uber. He pull up, and apparently he was like a big fan of the band. So like, imagine you're this guy, and you pull up, and Tim jumps into your back seat and takes. He was just like, you can tell he was trying to like, okay, be cool, don't speed, don't run any
I'm going to
lights.
take the long route to wherever we're going because I'm about to talk to
Right?
you.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it was funny. And he only said one thing. I mean, he was just like, "Oh, I just want to say I'm a big fan," and then he was kind of played it cool from there. But uh, yeah, that was a fun night.
They can go many places without at least one person stopping them and saying, I love
Mhm.
you or whatever. I mean, they're just an historical band, right? Like even if you're not a fan of their music or, you don't appreciate anything about them, you still heard of them, right? Because they're a name that's just been around now for 32 years. So it's just, unless you live in a hole, you've probably heard of them at least. Even my mother, who doesn't listen to music at all, she's like, heard of the Dave Matthews Band. So everyone's heard of this. So I just, I think I think that speaks volumes about, just who they are, but then their work. And so let's talk a little bit more about some other special, I guess, sneak peek behind the scenes that you've had with the band. Tell us about you sent me a couple of things before we did this interview, and so one of the things that you talked about was seeing your uncle on shows like Saturday Night Live and Letterman. So talk about that and like how weird it is to see, of course, someone that's very personal to you go onto these big stages with these big people and like the Grammys and all of the things. What is that like to see, not only as a fan that wants them to have these awards and appreciate their music and to see their success, but then also it's so personal, like, oh my God, my uncle, like,
Right.
tell us what that's like for you.
You don't really get used to it. Still to this day, and my fiance will give me trouble for it. Like I still get sort of giddy when they're going to be on something SNL, or I remember like he was on Ellen, so I'm like, what was she like? I was playing fanboy at that point. Not that I was like a huge fan of Ellen, just but yeah. So you don't really get used to it. I remember like the differences. I remember when he was in, I think it was the Crush video. It was like the first video he was in. And it's just a couple of snippets. You see him in the back, playing like Dave sitting in the lounge, and then it was like, oh wow, you can almost see his face, right? Or there's kind of him in the corner, and then like he was on like the Grammys, and they kind of showed him a couple, and then more and more and more as it went on, and then Letterman, he's shaking Dave Letterman's hand. I mean, it's Dave Letterman, like come on, and Tim is the coolest that like nothing really gets to him. Like he plays it super cool. Like if you see that, that's exactly how he is. Like he's like, oh yeah, he's fine, he's a nice guy. You know what I mean? Just everybody's just, I mean, he doesn't really geek out or anything like that too much. He'll geek out on music more
Chill
than he does
guy.
people. What's that?
Yeah, he seems like a super chill guy. Is that
Yeah.
reading accurate? Do I read him correctly
Yeah, he's
or
sort of
no?
a mix. I mean, he's a caffeine head like me. So what I'm doing here when I rock that, he does that a lot. I get told a lot. I do a lot of his mannerisms on stage. Well, we'll do that, and I never really bought into it. But recently, I've seen some videos like, okay, maybe I sort of do. So he's sort of, I guess, in between. He's very chill, but he does move a lot, and he can go from 0 to 100, like telling a story. Just it's very animated when he talks, when he gets into something.
Those are some things that I noticed when I was doing my homework before this recording, was just watching him, especially in TR3 setting, because, to me, just like you said, that is a very different setting for him versus Dave Matthews Band or anything else that he does. Like his personality has almost come alive within TR3, and I don't know if that's because that's his baby, like that's his namesake, right? That's his band, right? So he's just a little more into it, but like you can hear his voice, he talks, he sings, like all of the things that he doesn't necessarily do in a Dave Matthews Band
Yeah,
concert. So if you've never seen Tim in TR3, if that's the one takeaway from this video or this podcast that you're listening to, is definitely dig more into Tim Reynolds and the music that he is doing outside of the Dave Matthews Band. I love to point out how flexible these musicians are. And they're, once the Dave Matthews Band is ever said and done, which we don't hope that that's anytime soon, but these guys can go on to do so much more because they're masters of what they do. And I think Tim proves that with all of the things that he's doing outside of the Dave Matthews Band. So let's talk about the Vegas Dave and Tim show. Tell us some stories about that.
Oh gosh, let's see what I remember from that weekend first. Yeah, that's the only time that I've been on an airplane. I have the severe fear of heights and airplanes, and so and that was the way I got coursed into that trip. Is like, well, it's for Tim. It was actually for Tim's birthday. I want to say it was 2010 or nine, somewhere in there, one of those shows, and it was his birthday, but they had also got nominated for a Grammy. So whatever year that was is whatever it was. It was in December when they did Vegas like 3 years in a row. So we flew out to that and landed at 8 in the morning. I already had several Bloody Marys and whatever else, and then Vegas happens, right? So I was up the rest of the day. I don't even know, like time meant nothing to me at that point. But I remember at the show we left. So Rob again. He always seems to come up. So Rob and I left a little early, so we had to take a cab, run and get his birthday cake. Then we took it. Then we had like this sort of party deal at the. It was on the. I can't remember the name of it. I think it was the foundation room. It was the roof of the Mandalay Bay, is what it was basically. So we had, and they had one elevator with one button that went straight to this room, and he had to be on the list. And I remember like Oscar De La Hoya was up there, and I think Paris Hilton. Anyway, not for our party. They were just there. Like it wasn't for his birthday. Right? No, they were like waiting to sing Happy Birthday. But no, so we had to run and get this cake and then run it up there. And the cake was awesome. It had this. Tim used to do everything with like UFOs. He used to sign little spaceships on his next to his initials on autograph. So we had this alien with his famous Flying V guitar playing it, and it said "Congrats" and "Happy Birthday" or whatever on it.
Awesome.
That was a. It's one of those things like in the middle of it. I'm standing on the roof of Mandalay Bay. I'm looking out the lights with what's going on, the reason that you're there, and the party. It's like, wow, like this is a little surreal. And I don't do that a whole lot. I mean, and the shows are great and all of that too. I mean, I remember my friend Hugh. He used to be Tim's manager. He's rest in peace. He's passed away, but he took me on stage. He and my friends didn't know. I was sitting there with friends of mine. I went up to like go get a drink or something, and I ran into Hugh. We're talking. He's like, "Well, hey, let's go backstage. We'll go sit on the stage." And so I remember texting them from the side of the stage, like, "Sorry guys, I got soundtracked." And I'm just sitting right there, like they had this couch. I think I was sitting next to Ashley, Dave's wife, and she was like sleeping. And it was like this really awkward moment. I'm like, do I say anything? What do I,
Yeah.
do I nudge her? I'm like, I don't know. Do I get up? I don't. Um,
Yeah.
so my friends are of course freaking out. They're like, "How did you just walk in?" You know, um, there were so many little cool moments like that. Most of it though was our friends. Like I have a great group of friends. Everyone's got their DMV family, right? Your friends, and that's your DMV. And so of course I've got
Ooh.
mine. Yeah,
Yeah.
and so I was there with a lot of my closest ones from that community, and that was probably the best part. To have them there for a family birthday, all in one spot, through the concert, the whole deal.
Yeah, I
It's one of
can't
the
even
best memories.
imagine.
Yeah,
Amazing, amazing experience, not only for you, but for your friends, and of course, I'm sure for Tim. I mean, it's kind of a big deal. All of those things together.
yeah,
It's a big weekend, right?
yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about you and your voyage with the Dave Matthews Band. So tell me, like, what did you go to any shows this year? I mean, I know having a toddler makes everything a little bit harder to like leave and get things done, but what did 2023 look like for you? And if you didn't get to go anywhere, are there any things that stuck out this year? Because this year was quite a year for the band. And so were there any things that stuck out to you?
Probably my favorite story. I didn't get to go any shows to answer your question. The last show I went to was Chicago United Center this past fall. And then before that was the one I mentioned earlier in St. Louis that my kid went to and I went to school and all that. Because, yeah, having a family, they haven't been to St. Louis in a couple of years. So it's hard enough for me to travel. I used to go to Deer Creek every year and Europe Pines and all. So, but the thing that stuck out to me besides, the new album and the songs and, some of the different cover songs, things like that. Uh, I got to some of my very best friends, my friends Tom and Heather. They've been married. I've known them. I've known Heather since fifth grade. And they've never seen the band. They've never asked for a thing in their life. My friends are pretty cool like that. And his parents had moved down to Florida, and they were gonna. And so he called me. He's like, "Hey, he's like, I never asked." He's like, "But do you think you can get him into West Palm Beach?" I'm like, "No problem. They're like my other parents. I'll get him on the guest list for both nights, taken care of." And then he's like, "Well, I think we might fly down there and go with them because I had them each a plus one." And then to get the text that they were, and those were, I was watching those shows on the stream. I'm like, okay, you guys trust me. You are newer fans, but you got some good ones. And just to get the text that I was getting in the pictures and the stories, that they were just blown away. Like, we didn't know what to expect, but this was amazing, and everyone was dancing. And they're like, we're gonna learn all of the words to all the songs, so next year when they come, we'll know what everybody else was singing. And they got quiet. So like, those are the kind of things that made me feel good. As far as what stuck out this year was that, like, that was super cool for me. Probably outside of that was probably the same as a lot of other people. I like to see what different cover songs they come out with each year. Um, things they pull out that they haven't done in a few years. Yeah, the same, same things as probably a lot of other people. I like to give them crap. They do now. They do uh, what was that Zeppelin song? Gosh, I can't remember. They were doing the Led Zeppelin song, Dire Maker, I think it was. And no, it was oh my gosh, it's gonna drive me crazy now. Uh, but I had just played it, and Tim was at my gig. He was here in St. Louis, and so he came and
Yeah.
saw Matt and I play, and we did the song. And then 5 days later, DMB opens the show with this Led Zeppelin song. I'm like, come on. So I like to take the credit. And he swears, like, it's not me. I have no control over that. That was all Dave's idea. I'm like, okay, sure, buddy. Yeah, I'm still gonna tell
Well,
my friends that was me. Yeah.
yes, it was you. I mean, if it was, it definitely was. I mean, there's no way that's a complete coincidence because of all the songs in all the world. You just at
Yeah.
least put it in his ear, and he may not have like remembered, but like it was
Yeah,
you.
it's sort of
Yeah.
an inside joke now. Like, he's like, no way. I'm like, okay, we'll go with that.
Say. Scott, thank you so much for being part of this podcast. I think that you were able to give a completely different perspective that, of course, we've never heard before. I think that everyone is able to give a very different story because, of course, we come from different walks of life, different backgrounds. How we found the band may be completely different, and so, of course, your story is no different. It is different, but it is the same. How you became a fan, how you look at the band, how you have watched the band grow. But then, yes, there is that personal component to where it does look different, but not really, right? The things that they've been able to achieve and do, they would have always been able to do that. So to get a front row seat, if you will, like you have, is an amazing story. So I appreciate you painting that perspective for everyone that listens to this. And guys, definitely check out Scott. I have had the opportunity to watch many videos that of course you sent me and that are on your Facebook page. And so yes, you have a real skill, and no matter how you got it, I'm sure that Tim probably taught you the basics, but you've kind of made your own way, right? And your music sounds a little bit different than his. And so I think that your story is amazing. And I hope that, we can point the spotlight a little bit more on you. But thank you so much for being part of this and shedding like your perspective of the Dave Matthews Band. I really do appreciate it.
Oh, sure, no problem. Thank you. I had a lot of fun. I love
Absolutely.
talking about this. So,
Yeah, absolutely. So last question,
mhm.
fall tour, all the things that are coming up. What does the future look like for you? Are you going to try to venture out next year and maybe do a few things? And then like, when do you take your toddler to his first Dave Matthews Band show?
That's a good question. I think there's probably
Yes.
another year to go or two. I took my son to his first concert was Kiss when he was 6. So I feel like 6 is probably a good age for that. Next year, I don't, um, without like divulging any of like the summer tour plans or anything. I'm sure I'll make it to one. I mean, I can't go another summer without going to one. So, uh,
Of course.
yeah, I know they have Europe coming up, and I have an in-law family member in Paris that I would like to get them to go see.
Oh, yeah.
Um, so yeah, as far as that holds, I don't think I'll be able to make it anything. I was supposed to go to Madison Square Garden next week or next month. that probably will not happen. So I'm going to wait for something within a drive of where I live now.
Yeah, it feels like fall tour was most East Coast. I guess
Right.
maybe all East Coast, and so
Yeah,
that does make it a little bit. I'm only like 5 hours from you, Scott. So the middle
that's
of the
right.
country didn't get any fall tour, and that's okay. I would have loved to seen them do Kansas City, St. Louis. I
Hmm.
love those cities so much, and I think that who doesn't want to travel to Missouri, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if that's true, but hey, I love Missouri, but I'm close to it, so that means that's driving distance to me.
Tell your
Scott,
local
yeah,
promoter what I tell everybody. Tell your local, the band will go wherever the promoters book them. So tell your local promoter and the venues, book them. They'll come.
that has been proven. I live in Rogers, Arkansas. You would never think that the Dave Matthews Band would come here, but guess what? They do. They do, and so they do come to small towns, and we've been getting them like every other year. So, and that's a drivable concert for you, Scott. Come on down to
Yes.
Rogers, Arkansas.
Sold. I'm
It's
in.
beautiful in the middle of the Ozarks. I'll never stop selling Arkansas. If you ever get a chance, definitely make the stop. It's a small venue, 10,000 cap. It's a great, great venue. So again, guys, hey, thank you so much. If you're listening to this on a podcast app, just know that if you want to watch this, you can on my YouTube channel, which is just simply the Space Between Podcast. And make sure that you stay up to date on all of the episodes that we have upcoming. We're going to Charlottesville. So guys, if you are going to be in Charlottesville, definitely follow me on my social medias. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, all of the things. So definitely stay tuned. We're having an event at one of the vineyards in Charlottesville. So be sure to follow us on socials. And Scott, thank you so much for being part of the Space Between podcast.
Quite welcome. Thank you.
Awesome. Guys, peace, love, and Dave Matthews Band.